I'm trying to.
I'm okay. I'm managing. It's he's doing the
Yeah, I want to get see.
Okay, let's
Take notes. I'm here to take notes.
Hello again. Sometimes you meet properly, it's very good. Very nice. I want to this is great.
I see what you struggle with.
Well, I struggle with
Asking.
I struggle with everything. Oh, okay. I'm going to come cool like you and wear the stuff. I get look a bit younger now. Okay. Any more? One more? Oh. Right. Right. Okay, cool. Have you tried to? So Michael introduced. Oh yes, it's also filmed on Zoom. Okay. Cool. What is Zoom? Yeah. Oh, that's good. I'm happy. I'm just trying to think what I want to talk about now. So do you really do books? So well, actually about the do book, I should give anything about my background. So usually when people start to talk about background, really get got to it, and then we'll do a little overview. Yeah. So take a couple of words introduced. Yeah.
All right. Hi, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Royal Photographic Society and this first event for BOP, the Books on Photography Festival, which is our great new logo you can see on the lectern there. It's a real pleasure this evening to welcome you. We've got 2 days of photo books over Saturday and Sunday. So as you leave, if you haven't already pick up one of these, this will tell you everything that's happening and where it's happening. And also the RPS and Martin Parr Foundation have exhibitions. Martin's opening his this evening, so pop over to Martin. There's wine, drinks over there as well, and also our exhibition, Square in the Circles, is also open over the whole weekend. So do take advantage to see the exhibitions, but more importantly, come back at some point over the weekend. There's a great program of public talks and events and lots of wonderful, exciting photo books to see. So it's a real pleasure to hand over to Tom Broadbent this evening, who's the head of, I think the head's probably the right word, in charge of the Photo Book Collective who are putting on this evening's talk. Tom, over to you.
Thank you. Welcome to the talk. I'm really pleased to introduce you to Kalpesh Lathigra, who has published a couple of books. One I'm holding called Lost in the Wilderness. And he's a member of the Photo Book Collective, and I also see a few familiar faces. We've got quite a large presence at BOP this year. We've got a table out in the RPS, but we're also part of the main sort of book selling event space. So if you're around at the weekend, definitely come down, because I've heard on good authority that we're one of the friendliest tables there. So come along and you get to speak to mostly photographers who've self-published their own books, and that's essentially what the Photo Book Club Collective is all about. It's about supporting photographers to self-publish, to find a way to finance, to crowdfund, and we've definitely built up an amazing collective of photographers, and one of which is Kalpesh Lathigra. So, please.
Okay, cool. Hello. Hi, everybody.
Just to mention something quickly about Lost in the Wilderness, which is the book I'm holding here. This was Kalpesh's first book that he published in 2015.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2015.
And this book, which is about a journey into memory in America, the American Reservation. In fact, this is a book that set me on my journey to publishing my own book. So it's with a great pleasure to introduce.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, all right, so I don't know how many people know about my background, but I know Max is obviously a Craig Easton. We go back like 30 years. So I started off as a photojournalist, studied law for a year, dropped out, went to St. Martin's in the evenings, ended up at OCP, which is like OCC. I'd done a photojournalism diploma there, and I luckily enough won the independent newspaper scholarship. So it was a broadsheet at that time, a proper big newspaper. Then I got onto the staff there for a year and then turned freelance. And I shot kind of hard news features for about 7 years with them. And then I decided to leave to concentrate on long form projects alongside kind of little bits of commercial work. And it took us some time to kind of readjust from being a daily photographer to being somebody who wanted to invest time in project work and how to finance it, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, I struggled to navigate my way through. I'd done a couple of big projects, and then one of the projects, it led me to read a book called Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee by Dee Brown. And that book, it was seminal because it tells the story of the Native American experience from their point of view. So it wasn't like a kind of, I guess you're going to call it a whitewash from the American point of view of writing history. This was like word by word, what happened to the various tribes through the colonization of America. It ended with this event called Wounded Knee. It was called the Massacre of Wounded Knee. It used to be called a Battle of Wounded Knee, which is what the Americans called it. But it was a massacre. They killed 300 men, women, and children from the Oglala Sioux tribe on Pine Ridge Reservation. What was interesting with that point was that the cavalry that killed them, their general was General Custer. So if you know the whole kind of story of General Custer, the blue-eyed, blonde-haired general, you've ever seen paintings of him, he's always depicted as this kind of all-conquering hero. In fact, he'd actually been killed at the Battle of Greasy Green, which is the Battle of Little Bighorn, they call it. And his revenge, his remnants of his cavalry went to Wounded Knee and mowed down 300 men and women, children with Gatling guns. And it basically broke the cycle of the Native American kind of experience of their life. They felt defeated and they were pushed onto these reservations. Now, if anybody knows anything about the history of these reservations, what it is that the food was the worst food they were given, rations. The blankets were sometimes infiltrated and put with smallpox. You couldn't grow anything on this stuff. You were subservient to alcohol. Alcohol was kind of put onto the reservation by a really sneaky method of opening what I call a non-incorporated town on the edge of the reservation. So it changed their life completely. Alongside that, as laws were changed, some tribes had casinos. So they became quite successful, but this particular tribe and this particular reservation were quite trapped, and they always felt it was a punishment for defeating Custer. So I read the book and I decided to go there. And my first, my first pictures I took were terrible. They were shot on digital cameras, and I have nothing against digital cameras, but I was working as a photojournalist. And they were exotic and they were cliched, and they did not have anything other than visual, I don't know, nice compositions, good photographs, the 1, 2, 3 moment. But beyond that, it didn't say anything beyond that. And I just felt like that's not what I want to do. I'd been heavily influenced by that point by people like Alex Soth, William Edelstein, Mitch Epstein. He was interested in the American color movement. And the digital pictures weren't doing that, so I switched to manual Mamiya 7s. And I also did tons of research, like loads and loads of research. I mean, loads of reading and historical things like historical landscapes, stories that have been told there. And it kind of gave me a kind of idea about how to formulate the project And so every time I went there over a period of 5 years, I'd meet people, go back, read. I didn't even take proper pictures, I would say, until probably a year in afterwards. And it really helped because I think parachuting into a situation or a community like this, you don't endear yourself. You don't have to take. And I learned that rapidly. Actually listening and talking was much more valuable. And those stories led me into the projects I wanted to really, really concentrate on Pine Ridge. So I'll go through some of the pictures, and if you feel that you're asked a question, please just ask. And I'll try to talk you through why and the ins and outs of it. So this is a really quiet general picture, and it's just a trailer, in a trailer, like a house or trailer. And it's the kind of stuff that they eat, it's a bread, the kind of normality of life. And I found that really interesting. Like, how do you try to stop a cliche happening about what you expect of a Native American to be eating or whatever? So it's just a moment I just thought, but it's quite painterly, it's gentle, but it speaks volumes about life in that kind of moment. Very, very simple portrait of a grandmother, and obviously the T-shirt means a lot. It's a very direct portrait, and obviously the colorscape is very, very nice. It's just there, it holds again, but it's an engagement, with the woman there, kind of really trying to viscerally talk to me via the photograph. And this was made over about 3 days. So I spent time with her, going shopping with her, hanging out, talking with her, until she was ready to have the portrait taken. So this is a really interesting photograph. I want to talk about historical landscapes. How did this picture come about? So anybody know Bob Marley's music? I'm sure you've all heard it, right? So you know the song Buffalo Soldier, right? Okay. The Native Americans called black cavalrymen Buffalo Soldiers. Ever seen the film Glory? No? If you've seen Glory, go see Glory, Denzel Washington. Glory is the story of the first African-American regiment. They were based in a place called Fort Robinson. Fort Robinson is also the same place where Crazy Horse, the kind of legendary Lakota warrior, was killed. So in my head, all these kind of mini bits of research came together. I thought, I'll go to this place. So I went to Fort Robinson, and it was rubbish. It was like Disney-fied. I was like, I don't want to take a picture here. And it was left like, ooh, this is rubbish. I turned the corner, 2 minutes up the road, this was here. And I don't know if the idea of the flag in the land, you see, I know these kind of houses in America, and it kind of permeates or this thing like this. As a person of color, like, I would not go there because like that has this kind of connotation, like, that's not the house I want to go into. It's dangerous to me physically and like emotionally. And I saw this and I thought to myself, like, look at that, that's mad. So I took the picture, but also the other important circle of research is this thing called manifest destiny. It was the idea of the God-given kind of right by Christian values of European settlers to take what they wanted. And this was this kind of manifestation. We are on the land, this is us. Think about the flag on the moon. The American flag on the moon is like, we are here. So that's how this picture came out, through research and then serendipity. It's a really powerful picture. It works on the level of what I'm talking about. But if you take away everything I've taken or spoken about as a personal experience, if this was in a gallery, people would be like, oh, wow, what a picture. It's like a thing. So, and then if that starts a conversation, then I'm on the right track, the audience is listening and they can talk about this. And if that debate and discussion can take place, I've done my job right. And it kind of works for that. So research. This is Reverend Pedro Sharpfish. He's the Christian minister there. And I met him through a guy called Garvin Goodplume Jr., which I'll speak about later. And I went to his house and I'd learned some Lakota. So Lakota is the main language. And why is it important? This thing about when I talk about research and trying to connect with people, at least make the effort to connect with them. So we got into this conversation with these small words of Lakota that I'd learned. And he said to me in English straight away, you know what, Cal? He goes, Columbus made the biggest mistake. He should have found you boys first. Now, what does that mean? So you know the idea of the New World. The New World is thing where Columbus was trying to find India, but he found America in inverted commas. And that's why they call Indians, because they were trying to find Indian. So we had this kind of dark humor. And that kind of really carried me forward because it made me realize those simple things of dark humor, but also what lay behind it was the shared colonial experience. Like I had a friend who came on this project with me called Mark Hugo, who introduced me to the book. And he's a New Yorker of Ukrainian extract, you know, his family from the 1920s there. And he's white. And like the poor guy had so much difficulty there because they didn't share the same experience. And with the Lakota and me, it was this idea, historically, they knew that India had been colonized and they understood the weight of what I was carrying in my history. And it made it easier. And also making that effort of language, you know, even saying words like bullshit in check, and like, you know, you go, oh yeah, you know that. And it creates these moments where you can take somebody out, make a portrait, they understand the kind of work that you're trying to achieve and have this really quiet moment. But at the same time, you know, he carries so much strength and dignity within it, but not in a patronizing way, you know, he's holding his own there completely. So this photograph is, again, very ordinary. And I mean, just like it's in many ways, if somebody looked at something like this photograph, why would you take a picture of two chairs and a little kind of like thatch roof above it, right? This is, in this space, wider space, including this space here, is where 300 men, women, and children died or killed. That's the monument, that's the kind of space. And you think something like, you know, why are those chairs there? Because when tourists come, they sell little bits of trinkets to the tourists to make an economic living. But it's, I mean, it's haunted by ghosts. This space is empty, it's a nothing thing. And in many ways, a photograph is nothing. But that's my point. Like, where are we at that this has happened? Who wrote history? You know, why has this been left like this? Why has it not been memorialized? What is the place of the Native American in America now? You know, when we think about African American civil rights, we have, you know, we had all these organizations, and you know, they fought hard. Native American civil rights were kind of completely whitewashed, put aside. Think about how Hollywood portrays and has portrayed Native American culture through centuries. So, very simple photograph, but it's representative of mythology in the hope that if a white buffalo comes, the circle will be re-put together. So I just took that photograph there. This is the church that the survivors from the 300 people who've been killed, like, you know, who had managed to end up being on Christmas Day treated, and it's still there. And again, through the research, I found the church, went and made a photograph of it. And of course, the historical nature is really important to have in the book, but also about this idea where does the idea of Native American religion and Christianity and missionaries come into on the landscape. Basketball court in Oglala, which is one of the areas on Pine Ridge. So it's, I mean, there's multiple reasons for this. The main reason is this: how does culture embed itself on us? So I'm an East London boy, right? I grew up here, kind of speak with an, if I went proper slang on you in East London, you think I was Cockney, right? If I listen to music, I listen to the way I dress, how my kids are. I'm pretty much a Brit when I'm here, and I'm pretty much a Brit when I go India. I'm pretty much a Brit wherever I go, apart from when people look at me and think I'm Indian. But I am Indian, I'm not English. But how does British culture embed itself? So on Native American culture, sports. Look at this kid's t-shirt, AC/DC. Look at the beanies wearing the skateboarding, right? This is about culture embedding itself, how things change, how things move along. And it's important to show that, because whether we like it or don't like it, we are constantly evolving and changing for the better or for the worse. But, you know, the impact from simple things like language, losing your language or gaining your language. Like my kids can speak my mother tongue, but only recently, when I grew up at home speaking it, we had to kind of rein it in, get them to learn it. So these kids, they play basketball, they skate. How much of their own language has been wiped out? Richard Toledo. So obviously his mullet is amazing visually. The dogs make it all the red shorts. So those are all kind of points, right? You know, in terms of our visual language, what we're drawn to, because we know that as photographers and artists, we can put together a composition that kind of really works. And but luck is really, really important. And research is really, really, really important. So the house behind Richard was where in 1973, some men were held up in there and they were fighting a local governor and the FBI was sitting. So this is the nuance of reservations. Reservations aren't controlled by the state they're in, they're federal land. So that means the federal government goes. So the FBI went here. There was a shootout, and it's called Wounded Knee 2, and 2 FBI agents were killed. The so-called perpetrator, Leonard Peltier, he went to Canada. They extradited. He's still in prison, so they've been fighting for his innocence for ages. But that research took me to this guy's house, or the house, and I knocked on the door, and Richard walked out, and the dogs followed, and then a picture was made. Luck, research, serendipity, right? Together. And he's like, oh, also these things like the sun dancer, which kind of, again, you're not allowed to photograph sun dances, but he was a sun dancer, and he gave me my in to kind of put that into the story as well. These are governor's houses, so they are reclaimed houses from floods and storms that are then transplanted back onto the reservation for reusage. About, kind of the idea that they would never be given new housing, they were given like hand-me-downs. I wanted to show that. It's a rest car, it's a poor place. You're not going to get away from that. I can try to say to myself, how do I get away from the cliches and not the downing of a place, right? But at the same time, as a photographer, as a documentary photographer, this is the reality, and part of it alongside the other work I've shown. It's important to balance that and show what is happening in these other places of America. Like, what's our idea of America? We know the coastals, we know New York, LA, Miami. Visually, we look at TV, but we don't look at stuff like this. And I was at the Chris Killip last night, the exhibition. So I grew up during the Thatcher years, and it was a visceral reminder of, damn, that's what we were living through. But the regions he was photographing, we were in London. We didn't see all of that. Now we've got the evidence and see that it's there. And it's so relevant. Think about today, what's happening in the country today. So things like this, documenting is important. Oh, there we go. Move back one. Grandma after a church service. And just a positive picture, just happy. No reason behind just because it's a lovely picture. This is that white place, that town I told you about where they sell alcohol. And again, I could have just gone and photographed, in inverted commas, drunk Lakota. What's it going to achieve? He was drunk. No denying that. But I wanted to have some sort of dignity to him, and also what he was wearing. This is all important to me. All of these things, the all sides of America, moments, the hat, all of these things, to bring into the photograph. With that, you can also see this. Again. Luck, cowboy. At home, again, just chips and drinks. Dead coyote. They make these into like tourist envelopes. They sell to people who come across state to kind of like have the Native American experience. How do I get a picture like this? I was drinking the night before with a Navajo, which is another tribe from the west in Arizona. And he told me the night before I have an affinity to wolves and coyotes. I was laughing because I thought we'd been drinking too much. So the next day we go for a drive and he goes, stop the car. Something's not right. We walk out the car, walk within 5 yards, and we find 5 dead coyotes. It's a bit nuts, but things happen, which are kind of like interesting. This is buffalo blood from a hunt on the prairie grass. It's metaphorical, obviously, of the blood that was spilled. and led by Lakota, but it's also an economic picture. And what I mean by economic is, yes, obviously it's economic in its kind of visual sense, but it's in the economy. They've reintroduced buffalo onto the reservation. So buffalo almost wiped out for the fur, not the meat, the fur. The buffalo was like, imagine the buffalo provided you with everything you needed in your life, your clothing, your food, your shelter. That's what the buffalo represented for the Native American. They were almost wiped out for the furs by the European settlers. Today, you have small buffalo groups on the reservation. And for economics, they have hunters coming into the land to hunt buffalo for sport. They provide an income. And I wanted to kind of play and show those ideas. Broken Cross kind of speaks for itself with the kind of whole missionary thing. These are the hunters. So they come in there with SUVs going cross country, not horses, because horses would be the thing, right? Hollywood show us horses, whooping Indians. But no, these are guys. They're dressed in their workwear, nice SUVs going across land. The guy who's the actual hunter, this guy here, he makes his own bows and arrows and kicks and stuff. He's into Native American culture. They kind of freaked me out a bit. I'm like, do people actually do that? They're like, yeah, we get loads of them, and they pay thousands of pounds to like kind of come and hunt. So this is a really interesting picture. Tom, how many for time? We good?
About half an hour.
Okay, I'm going to speed this thing. So, all right, is everybody okay to speed up going? I'm kind of like burning through them. So this photograph I just took, right? Like, I'm sure you all, I mean, you've got a camera, something just draws you to a photograph. I'll just take that moment and forget about it. Anyway, I took the photograph, and then I was in New York, and there's this amazing bookshop called The Strand. If you ever got to New York, go to The Strand bookshop. And I was buying some books on Native American culture, but I was walking on this corridor, and this book just popped out, and it's called The Lost Bird of Pine Ridge. And it's a bit mad, right? Like, it was like a bit spooky. And I bought the book, and it's actually, this is the grave of a girl who actually survived Wounded Knee. Her mother kind of fell after being shot, and the baby was kind of sheltered, but she was taken as a trophy to California by one of the generals. And she lived in California since she was 19, suffered quite badly trauma, and became alcoholic, and died at, I think, 20, 21. Anyway, many, many years later, this journalist kept having dreams about a girl on a carousel. And somehow she related it back to Lost Bird. And they traced the body of Lost Bird back to California, and they found it, and then they took her body back to Pine Ridge, where she was then buried at Wounded Knee Cemetery. But like I said, luck. Something drew me to that moment, and I made the thing. So I wish I could just show you my old pictures, like what kind of photographer I was before. I was quite hardcore black and white, but I don't know, something changed in me. And it's not the storytelling process of what I believe in, but I just felt I could make work like this in a kind of in a much more nuanced way. And why I'm saying it, because you look at the next body of work in Memoire, which is completely different to this, and it's much more personal. And I don't know, maybe I'll go back to this kind of way of working. Kind of like I was saying, like, you know, I don't want to say it again, but I'll say it again. Last night was really phenomenal. It really moved me. Made me really think about why I'm a photographer. Why do I make work? And maybe I've lost a little bit, and maybe I'm not. I don't know, but it made me think I'm in this kind of middle ground now about where I want to be. That's Wounded Knee Cemetery, taken from a distance. So I pace the work very much in a non-linear way. So in photojournalism as such, where I was taught you do you have a shoot list and you're 1, 2, 3, get pictures, and I learned that way of working. But with this, when I moved to this kind of way of storytelling, I was much more interested in this idea of poetry and letting pictures jump back and forth and have a very non-linear narrative through them. Girls, this is a sweat lodge in the winter. We saw the kind of frostbird, used for spiritual purposes. That's that buffalo whose blood we saw earlier. White Jesus. Again, you know the connotation I've spoken about, they're kind of missionaries. Hollywood, Westerns, you know, damsel in distress. curtains, histories of the photographs on the wall there. Modernity, kids, all of this stuff is about breaking cliches about what our ideas are. Because when you think about Native, when I talk about Native Americans when I was a kid, there was whooping and headdresses and the bad guys and bows and arrows. This is John just looking out. His great uncle was buried in Brompton Cemetery in London. He came on the Buffalo Bills show. Now, weirdly, I photographed they removed the body when I was a newspaper photographer in London, and it turned out 20 years later, I found the body that had been buried in his backyard. The boys against the girls this were earlier. Again, look at the way what they're dressed, how they are, the idea of hip hop. Some buffalo steak. Lovers saying goodbye. Indian for sale, it's obvious, right? It's a 1, 2, 3 picture, but it works. Pizza Hut, we saw a special green landscape of the prairies. Woman making a fall in Star Village. The Badlands. This is a really important picture. This Vincent brings plenty. So Vincent dictated the terms of this photograph. What I mean by that. So I met Vincent in Star Village. He's a holy man. We spoke at length and he said, yes, you can take my photo. I'm going to wear my headdress for you on the condition that this is the only photograph of a Native American that you take for this project with a headdress. And I asked him why. And he said, I want to confront your audience. I want you to want them to think to themselves, why is there only a picture that of a Native American with a headdress on, yeah? What are the connotations you think about when you see me? What do I represent to you? So if you think about the book, if you go for the whole book, this is the only picture with what we would envisage our idea of Native Americans, Red Indians, the Redskins, all of this stuff we carry. When you watch John Wayne, or Gary Cooper, when you play cowboys and Indians, as I did, I was never allowed to be the hero. I was never the cowboy. Why? So, this is the thing, partly because I'm brown, right? But also Indian, all that stuff. What's put into us? And that's not trying to put a guilt trip on anybody, but I want to really think about how we are conditioned about certain things, about believing about people, by things like popular culture. Knocking on doors in motels made this photograph. These are mixed blood, so they're half European, half Lakota, and she's obviously expecting a young baby, and sitting and talking and having a drink and just explaining the project. This is how this portrait came about. And this is the idea of the future, the idea that this community is growing and moving forward and trying to leave the reservation. Old house, new house. Stereotypes, right? Makes it like a really, really ordinary picture. It is very much an ordinary picture. Landscape, trees. But this is the Black Hills. It's part of the Black Hills. The Black Hills have been held in trust. They were taken from the Lakota because gold was found here. And it's been never given back. The American government has said you can have millions and millions of pounds for it. You just let us have the land. The Lakota have steadfastly for the last 200 years said, no way, this is our home, this is our land. I want to show the kind of dignity, the silence, the quietness, the simplicity. There was a nothingness, but I'm sure walking in a space like this for the Lakota brings some sense of being, rooting, home. That's why that's in there. So this photograph, okay, you don't really recognize who he is, right? Well, us old people should recognize who he is. Right? If you young people don't, it's a guy called John Wayne, who's the archetypal American cowboy, right? This is a place called Dairy Queen. Dairy Queen's like McDonald's in Montana. But the title of the picture is called Marion. Why is it called Marion? Marion is John Wayne's real name. It's to kind of take away that power of that name of Hollywood, of John Wayne. Marion, why is it called Marion? People look at it, why is this picture called Marion? You know, he was the kind of the guy, like he literally like personified the idea of what to do with the Indian problem, as it was called, you know, in the 1800s. You know, and you see all the kind of strutting of that. This is like a Dairy Queen, like a burger bar. It's a bit of a fine, but it's quite fun. But it's also playing, like me, it's having a laugh and playing with the idea of how you disrupt stuff. Again, just taking an account of Costa and the motors for sale is quite comical. And that's the reason behind it. How do I, as a photographer, as an artist, or whatever, take away the power of a legend by kind of twisting it and kicking it in the teeth a little bit and make people laugh a bit? You know, General Custer. I remember seeing him on weirdly, I think he'd be on Budweiser bottles at one point. There's a picture of it. But yeah, it's just messing with it a bit, you know. Inside a home, which was a home, you know, just capturing a moment. Fridge. That's a Sundance site. So I told you earlier that you don't like to photograph the actual Sundance going on. So that's my respectful kind of formation of that. And in many ways, it's really kind of works because, you know, having a Sundance might have kind of spoiled it. It might have, you know, you can imagine it maybe a bit more now. And what could have been? What kind of happens today? How do they keep the culture alive? Do I really need to show the dancing? Maybe there's just enough left to the kind of audience's reaction and their imagination. The Cherokee River. These are spiritual ties. This is, so I always say to people, this is my one successful photograph I've ever taken in my whole life. Because when I looked for a camera, it actually worked like I saw it. And it actually worked. It's the only picture I exhibited in my own house. I have a wall there. And it's kind of, it is what I saw. But what's important for me is that it has the feedback loop within my culture that these are offerings left to their ancestors. And within Indian or Hindu culture, I'm not really practicing much, but my parents used to send me to the priest's house. I had to go and leave offerings for our ancestors, like hazelnut chocolate and sugar and flour and cornflakes, because my auntie used to love it. But you know, they put chewing gum in there and like cigarettes and tobacco, and it's all the things that their ancestors would love. And I wanted to kind of show that, again, that feedback loop, but also the beauty of it. And you know, it works. It worked for me as a photograph. So you know, you don't always know that. You imagine a photograph, and it never quite turns out, but this one did. Portrait. Okay. So I'm going to speed up again. So if you look carefully here, so you look at the book, you see that kind of shadow that's happening. So behind that, like I said, it was called the Battle of Wounded Knee, and then it was replaced the Massacre of Wounded Knee. So that literally is the memorial to those people that were there. Timelines, not the American flag, not the old photographs, not the soldiers. Kid on a horse, not whooping. Very still, elegant. That's a memorial to Custer and the Battle of Little Bighorn in Montana. Look at the differences, what I just showed you. You play those two together, you know, it shows you where serendipity, the cowboy just turned up. These are Lakotas, they're Indians. They turned up and we're on the trip there. So this is cowboys and Indians today. Paris, embedding of culture, I was telling you earlier that. Welcome to Mustang country, striving to be violence-free. Vincent's bedroom. Note the plastic on the lamp. Anybody goes to an old Indian's house, and I don't mean old Indian as an Indian as in me. My parents used to wrap that shit everywhere. Remote controls, lamps, everything. I was like, you know, I've got my friend's house, the same stuff, and like here, in the middle of like, you know, South Dakota, same thing. It touches you, it holds you. That's a picture again. That's it. that's that project done. So the book's here, when you look at how it works, but I hope that's given you some little insight about where I was at that point. Michael, this is a PC. They're going to like a horribly Mac proficient PC, not so much. That's not a memoir. So that's the one. Okay. Brilliant. Okay, so we're good for time, Tom? Yeah, you're all right. All right, yeah. Have I bored anybody yet? No, cool. Okay, so it's going to sound weird what I'm going to say next, right? So, like, so Alex stopped telling me on his journey, right? So I've seen his book Lost. I wish it was called Lost. Superman of Mississippi, right, in Liverpool. I was on a fashion job. I went to the open eye gallery, and it changed my life because I'd never seen color photography that way. It was very, very. I knew nothing of Eggleston or any of those people. I was kind of in like a revelation, right? Now, the closest color that I really loved was like Rothko or Saitobi and people like that. I just never really understood color photography, and so I did Lost in the Wilderness. And then after I did it, and a few years later, like I felt empty. I felt like, okay, that's good, because it was always like following a trend, and it was like following this idea of like what was cool or whatever, and I needed to wash like Alec out my system. That's terrible, isn't it? How can you wash Alex off out your system? But I needed to find my voice. I thought there was enough of that American system going on, and it's good to do it. I don't regret working with it. I might return to it, but I need to get away from it. And so I was sent on this job by Design, German magazine, to go from Glasgow to Calais before the Brexit referendum. And so I went on this like 2.5-week trip across the UK. And I swear, like, I was born in London, right? So kind of like I grew up with racism, and then kind of went away for a bit, or he went simmering somewhere in some corner. Anyway, it kind of like I heard stuff I'd never heard for like 40 years almost, and it really threw me. And I know it wasn't all bad, but it was some of it was like the stuff that hurt was bad. And I'm not like, people that vote leave, that's your problem, your issue. So, but I don't kind of real thing about it, but the racism side of made me really think, where do I belong? And so I got to London, and I was like, shit, what's home? And it could have been like India's meant to be the romantic motherland. You yearn for it as an immigrant or children of immigrants. We're all kind of harking for this place, this notion of home. And I thought about Brexit. I thought, was it nostalgia that kind of set that whole thing off? Like this idea of a country that existed and doesn't anymore. And do I go to the motherland? And is that like, should I be photographing the idea of the motherland? But then I started thinking about nostalgia just generally. And I started thinking about how much nostalgia have I been fed about India? Who put it there? Are these real memories? Are these perceived memories? Is it popular culture? Is it a sense of wanting to belong? I wanted to explore that. So I started this journey, and I went to Bombay, and I had this idea in my head that Bombay would have been the place that, I'm a city boy, so I thought that's where I would have been. That's where my family would have stayed if we were to stay there. So my family left in the 40s to East Africa. My dad came here in the 60s. But my grandfather lived in Bombay in the 1930s. And I thought, what would happen if we stayed there? What would happen to me? So I wanted to go on this journey, but I didn't want to make exotic images of India. This idea, I don't want to down like Steve McCurry or it was what it was, but this exoticism of spiritual India that we all know, we all buy into. I didn't want to do any of that, so I started making pictures that were emotionally resonating. So what do I mean by that? That means you walk and something catches your eye, you look, you stay, you sit with it for a while, and if it triggers something in your body, your mind, something in your soul, something you read, you take a photograph of it. It doesn't have to be a good picture, it doesn't have to be a bad picture. It's a recording of a moment. It's a very different way of working. You don't know quite why you are reacting to taking that photograph, but it's a physical need to make that photograph. So that was the kind of the foundation of it. No research, just a foundation of just going on. And I started listening to music, I started researching about the stuff my parents used to make us listen to. And I'd have the headphones on, I'd be listening to the music. And I'd have like the Google Maps out, and I'd do like a metaphorical pin drop. And I'd be like, I'm gonna walk 5 miles, and I'm gonna photograph stuff along this location. So I'd leave my hotel, and I'd just be walking all day, just with my cameras. I'd take a small point and shoot, small digital point and shoot, my Memoire 7, whatever took my fancy that day, and I just started making pictures. So this is the results of that. It's like a crater inside a windshield in a very dusty, hot season of Bombay. This is a sculpture within something called a place called Elephanta. Elephanta Islands is off the coast of Bombay. It's called Elephanta because the Portuguese went there and they found the Ganesh, the elephant god statues, and they named the Elephant Island. Why is the Portuguese link important? So my surname is Lathigra. You ain't Patel, right? So it matter. It's not like it's an unusual surname. The region that my family are from in India, in Gujarat, there's a place called Daman and Diu. It's where the Portuguese colonized Daman and Diu and also Goa. So there's this tenuous link. Might not be real. My dad refuses to believe it, but my Portuguese friend told me Lathigra is actually a Portuguese surname. So I went there with that in my mind. It's like, oh yeah, we could have ended up in Portugal. We could have been Portuguese. So I was playing with that. I found spiritual ties again on the trees. So if anybody's been to India in the hot season, don't do it because it really is. Mad Dog's an Englishman, right? There you go. That's a funny one thing. So I used to go out in this heat, and I come back like heat stroke, and it used to play on my mind. Like it might have gone mad. So I'm sitting in my hotel room, and I saw this palm leaf like waving in the flipping wind. That's interesting. So I photographed it, right? And then I started thinking in my head, why did I photograph it apart from being a heat stroke? So in the book, I write about how like feeling lost in the green and pleasant land. So my dad would take us to trips to the seaside. So my dad was a bus conductor, and his garage would take us on these trips every weekend to, I don't know, walk on a maze, whatever. But we'd never go to the countryside. The countryside scared the hell out of me. And it still scares the hell out of me. Even though I was a news photographer, they sent me to the countryside. I was like, oh God, people are going to stare at me. I hate it. All that greenery to kill me. It shouldn't really. It's really beautiful, right? But I never had that problem in America, like that fear. And I never had it in India. And I was quite interested in kind of like playing again in my head about these facets of how can I bring that alive through my photographs. I was like, this is like, that's one of the pictures I made. I've got a boy racer. Put that in there. Found guys who were kind of like building kind of like Fast and Furious. That's a TV series. So I started filming. So I photographed this to play. So in the book, these two play against each other. Rhododendrons, just beautiful flowers. Again, that whole idea of nature. And not feeling the need to make a photograph other than I want to make a photograph. Something drew me to that. An American car in a garage in the middle of Bombay by where fishermen are getting repaired. Shadows in a Christian place within Bandra. A moped being covered by these kind of patterns of flowers. Saris being wrapped around trees. Nature again, growth. Back to these plimps within Elephant Island. They're very reminiscent of shivlings. You know about shivlings? Those are research to do with Hindu religion and Shiva. They're shaped kind of like that. Planets and waters, the idea of astrology. So one of the interesting things I started doing was trying to say, okay, so I didn't want to do street portraits. I wanted to find people who I could cast into roles. So this is Damien, but this is Damien being me at like 13, 14. And we found him for a modeling agency and we photographed him, and this is kind of what I look like. And so some people look at the book and they're like, is that your son? But we found that. So it was a very different way of working. So rather than going on the street and saying, I want to photograph you, it was like, let's find this person, let's find that person. They go to an agency, let's see who we can put together for this story, because it's partly fictional, right? You see through the book metaphors towards migration. So this is a model where a swallow, I've got 2 swallows now as well, which is him. But we had this whole idea of birds and migration going through the book. You see it as you go along. What the tide takes out, what it brings back, remnants. Again, metaphors. India's meant to be my homeland. When I go back to India, when I go back to Bombay, I'm carrying all of this from the UK with me, this weight, you know. Do I belong? Don't I belong? They call me an NRI over there, which means non-resident Indian. So I'm not really an Indian, I'm kind of an Indian, but you're really a Britisher. That's how they refer to me, as a British, as a non-resident. And this is again a metaphor. What remains of us? You know, the burning of time, the pollution and the smoke, it's a kind of romance in many ways of the place, and this kind of mirages that we build around us. This could have been my girlfriend. She's a very nice girl, but she could have been like, we cast her for the role, you know? Housing just in the warm light. This is Bandra Highway, and the cities in the background. This is the kind of new India. And just yes, a moment. There's a little boat there, right? Just there. And that again is to do that journey, going and leaving a place. My father and his brothers left from Porbandar, which is a port in Gujarat, to go to Mombasa in Kenya, and then took a train to Nairobi. Spent 20 years there. And it's just the thing about leaving. The flip side, completely different thing, not to do with the project. How do I make money to pay for this stuff? So sometimes you get lucky. So this photograph is using a band called Interpol's album cover, which paid handsomely, and then it kind of made me go back and continue to work. That's how I kind of pay for stuff. I kind of find ways of kind of people to buy rubbish and then use it somewhere, and then like those flowers. That's an interesting one. The flowers I sold to a record company again, and they manipulated them for a band called Friendly Fires. And then you look at one of the covers, it's just kind of psychedelic. But in my photograph from Bombay, the flowers. Right, so this is quite interesting. So this is again a really new way of working. So this is a manipulated photograph of a seascape. And how did it come about? My scanner went wrong, like the episode 750 kind of scan, it messed up. I was like, oh, this is interesting. Pulled it onto the kind of main screen and started working on this kind of these hues and tones and whatnot. Like being in a dark room, right? Why is it important? Not this working on a picture thing, but why is it important to put myself into this kind of moment? What does it show? Well, the story is this. 200 years ago, if you were an Indian and you left India and you were a Hindu, you were told that you would lose your very culture, your religion, your caste, your very being, who you were as a human being within this cascade of Hinduism. What do immigrants do? What do I do? What do my parents do? Immigrants hold on to our things even tighter. We embed ourselves in this idea of a place and hope that we can pass on to our children this culture. The reality is this: that land that we left, that romanticized place of India, is purely a notion. That country has moved on in decades. It's not the same place. It probably never was. But we carry that, and I wanted to kind of show this in these sort of seascapes that I've made along the way. You can see them. They're very gentle, but I want the audience to kind of be lost in them, to really think about why I've made these pictures. And even in the book, they're presented vertically, and they're almost like stopgaps, and it takes the audience a lot of time to actually, oh, what, that's a photograph? It's important, why I can do the 1, 2, 3 picture. I want you, so all of us, to really think about what we're making. That's the closest and easiest shot, right? You can see. Okay, segregation, new builds, warm light, structures. Inside the hip hop guy's bedroom. Back to the Goans again and the Portuguese. Young men in their haircuts and a kind of beauty of touch. Suspicions about the stranger. Hip hop, Why hip hop? I used to be a hip hopper. I used to be a b-boy back in the day. I used to be a b-boy back in the day. Yeah, in East London, it's really good. We were called the Kappa Crush Kids. And I've done a story on hip hop in Bombay, and he brought those memories back. That's why they're in the book. Yeah, there you go. I could never do that though. I was like, that is good. You know, a hitcher. You know, the traps we make. You know, the boy lover. You know, at the beach. The birds again, right? The lovers. Now, this is a really, again, interesting. So, Kungan is now a proper model back in the UK now. He's actually from northeast India. But he said to me, Cal, you know what? People keep asking me, are you Indian? And he goes, do people say that to you? Are you Indian? And he played that thing. So that's what people say, are you Indian? And I'd go, are you Indian? I said it to him too, and he's actually from India. And I wanted him to talk about that, just take a picture of him. Old man going up to the islands. She's Shiva. So if you know about Hindu gods and whatnot, Shiva is a masculine form. He wears a leopard skin shawl. He's all powerful. I wanted to kind of mess that up a bit with his head, man. Let's have a female. Let's do that. That's a real strength. So we had Rosalind wear a Shiva skirt with a split sexuality by a shivling. That is a shivling. Hip hop. Mangoes. They're not my favorite mangoes, those are Alfonso's. You get something called Kessar mangoes, Kesai. The seasons are really good. The family god, the family goddess, or like members of my family, she rides on a crocodile. That's her form of transport. Hence, moment here. The old grandfather. Thug life, hip hop. Picture again. Right, where's Craig? Ford Capri, bro. That's our generation, isn't it? Ford Capris. They're classic cars, but it took me back to my childhood. This is just like a garage in Bombay. You know. So when you look at these pictures, when you compare them to Lost in the Wilderness has a real kind of foundation of research. These are just like poetry. These are just moments. And it's freedom in many ways for allowing me to kind of break away from the idea of who I see myself as a photographer, as an artist, and how I see my relevance and whether I can switch back and forth, and the freedom that this thing that we love allows us to do in the work we make. You know, there's not a set way of doing it, but I'm still a storyteller. This is just a different formation, a way of telling a story. If you see the book, like how big Lost is, like Memoir is like that small. It's a journal. You can stick it in your pocket, and in here there's 6 pieces of writing, and two of the pieces of writing are by me, which is my first experiment to go kind of doing it. And I just wanted to kind of let somebody just put it in their bag, look at the work, come back to it. You know, it's just, it performs its particular role. So remember this picture in your heads, okay? This is our romanticized moment of how when life is really good, and what this sunset is meant to mean in our kind of general lives. Sunsets. What do sunsets mean for us? Shavings of slate. Young wrestlers on the beach. Pomegranates. My dad used to give these as offerings to all the gods in our house. Another girlfriend. Another girlfriend. The old man again. Paper plates from weddings. The earth giving way. A calendar without a date. A building with one window closed, the rest open. Opportunities, etc. The red cow. See the bit on the thing there, that red powder? It's called cinder. It's like when they put on married women. But the cow, if you know about anything about Hinduism, and you know about the idea of sacred cows, and if you know about the politics of India today, with nationalism and fascism, the cow is prevalent. How many people have been lynched with the idea that people are eating cow meat, beef? I wanted that in there. It was a subtle reference to put in there about where I sit on this whole thing. And I thought that to be there to make people remember that, you know what, these romanticized versions of these holy lands that we are meant to belong to, yeah, they're not, it's not a real thing. Like, you know, this is going to be interesting. I want you to keep an eye on the guy in the picture. Okay, so that is me hanging around waiting for pink shirts to arrive, because I just saw this at a moment. And I wanted to kind of take this idea of triptychs, of repetitive memory, making our heads think about how we think about things. What do we remember? So, think, man, you know, the lovers, the lucky restaurant where to eat. So this guy, he's now a really successful model. We shot him for a fashion story. So I'm gonna embarrass him. So this guy in the cap over here, Max Ferguson, right? We were at a job. We were at a job for the FT magazine, and he was working. And I said, Max is looking at Port magazine. I said to Max, I got this idea. I want to go to India. I want to set the foundations for this project I'm working called City by the Sea. And I said, can we do like a fashion story? It might be quite an interesting way of kind of going into this idea of this space that I don't really know, but it might give me an insight. So he managed to get me, he wangled me a commission to kind of think, this is a really good idea. So we went there, we cast this guy. And the reason we cast him, now in the 70s, there was this actor called Shashi Kapoor, who married to Felicity Kendall's sister. But Shashi Kapoor was like my hero. And so this kid was like the personification of him. And I really, that's why this picture's in there, because it's visceral of my childhood. That kind of the idea of the hero in Indian cinema, you know, he wasn't like the biggest star, but he was quite big, but not as big as a big star. But it went in my system. I grew up with that, and you know, it's very, very important. And you know, that's the idea of what I'm saying about, you know, casting people, which is again relatively new to me. Walking through the kind of shipyards, hip hop again, walking through the shipyards again. But if you look at it, look at the pacing, right? That's the thing when we do the book. It's literally, if you look at that picture there, where he's at, and the reason of that timeline from where he started. Now, when you're making books, you know, things like that you can do. You know, maybe you could do it in a gallery wall as well, you know, if you're clever enough. But I thought in a book form, it's quite nice that if you had one picture there, then maybe 2 pictures down the road, you had another picture that put that feedback loop back into the system. That remind you. Remember, the book's called Memoire Temperelle, Temporary Memory. Plane flying, leaving. Broken statues now. Birds again. On the ferry. That young guy, bare-chested now, masculinity. Elements of the city being protected by dust, from the dust. The old man trying to discover his past. Look carefully, you see Africa in that bouquet there. If you can't, I'll point you out. Look at the shape. The girl it could have been. How the saffron flag of the BJP still is riding high. How much it's controlled. Where its position is in the world below. Remember that sunset I showed you earlier? This is the negative of that sunset. What are sunsets we don't talk about? What are memories that we leave behind? What are ones we don't want to think about? For me, this one was about being in the Costa Brava at 16, in a place called Sioux, where I had an ear infection and my so-called friends left me and I had to beg to be taken to hospital. So remember those sunsets that are not sunsets. Anybody seen this drink before? Right? So I'll give you a little bit of history on it. So it says now the Coca-Cola company's there, right? But back in the day, Coca-Cola was banned in India. So they made their own Coca-Cola called Thumbs Up. It became the stalwart. It was the things. I grew up on this stuff. My parents would take it in, drink it, and spice it and whatnot. Anyway, many years later, when Coca-Cola was allowed back in the country, they tried to compete against this brand, and they failed miserably. And they had to compete, they had to buy it out, right? So now that's what that's it. How did the picture come about? That heat stroke moment. I had like 5 or 6 bottles of this inside in the hotel fridge. And I sat it down, and all this memory started flooding back over. Masala Coca-Cola, masala cola, masala thumbs up. My parents were sprinkled. I thought, what a moment, and just shot it in the bedroom. In the book, there's this amazing poem by Rabindranath Tagore, who's a Nobel laureate of India, the Shakespeare of India, pretty much. This was taken inside a hip hop guy's kind of flat apartment by chance, but it triggered all these amazing memories. So as a boy of 13, I wrote a poem called Free Bird to the Newham Recorders, and Newham is the borough I'm from in London. And I was like, it was my first like journalistic piece, like this poem that was published. It was called Free Bird. I was like, oh yeah, that's great, amazing. And then my first big assignment as a photographer at the Independent was going to Honduras when Hurricane Mitch hit Honduras. And the book in my reading book in my pocket I took was Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou, right? My daughter is named after Maya Angelou. So again, and then this Rabindranath Tagore's poem, The Tame Bird in the Cage. If you haven't read it, I would wholeheartedly recommend it. It will kill you. It's so beautiful. It's like, it's life and love. And this picture is a personification of temporary memory, you know, the things that we hold and let go of. Back in the mist, a butterfly, short-lived, right? The fire's burning. Daily life, the moments that, you know, how many times we've seen this scene over and over from our own bedroom windows. 2 young men going out for a party. The bride's leftover flowers after a photo shoot. The tree that's been scorned. The plastic that remains after the city's been trying to be protected from the dust. The food that of childhood memories that was imported over. The car crash of what was my life, what is my life, the noise around it all in a city that's meant to be a home. That's it. Okay. So you can see how different the work is. You know, it's it has the authorship of me still in there, but it's for me it's all about growth and where do you go and what are you trying to say with your work, and that's the most important thing. If you take anything away from what I've talked about today, all the madness of what I've spoken about my practice or how I take photographs, is be authored. You know, be authored about the work you pick and why you make it. Try not to follow fashion, and I don't mean that literally, but you know, don't make work because you think it's the thing that's going to get you work. It's not. You're going to get work as young photographers and artists or whatever in the world because an editor or whoever's going to commission you wants your authorship. My authorship is I'm always itching and moving and trying to kind of disrupt my own practice. You know, my next project might be archival. I don't even know yet, but I am physically still very interested in photography. You know, it provides purpose in my life. And sure, I do really rubbish jobs at times that nobody ever sees. It pays for this stuff that allows me the kind of freedom to kind of explore my own kind of eccentricities about life and where I'm going with it. But, you know, and the books provide a kind of an outlet. It's interesting because like I never thought I'd self-publish a book or 2 books, but what it's giving me freedom, and I don't, you know, they don't cost that much to publish in a kind of wide kind of things, but I have quite a big support network that kind of helped me along and kind of allow me that kind of freedom to play with what I want to do, you know, as an expression of my work. And it's kind of, it's like you'll see the 2 books, and I think Tom's got one there, you see the smaller one. They're you know, they're very, very different. Okay, that's me. I literally have people with questions.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions at all? I'm very happy to take some.
If not, oh, there you go.
When you're talking about like feeding out the Alex off.
Yeah.
Wanna
Expand on it.
any words about that process?
Yeah, I tell you what set me off on that. No, I tell you what set me off on that. Why I said that. I did a portfolio review in Spain, right? And the curator was from MoMA. And my friend, I'm going to name drop here, but you might know his work. So it's guy called Zed Nelson. So Zed Nelson was a guy before me, and there was somebody else just like an American photographer. And Zed overheard this curator say to this young photographer, "I'm so effing sick of seeing you lot copy Alex off." And I was like mortified. I was like, "Oh my God." So it set me on this trajectory. And the thing is, there's nothing wrong with Alex Soft. Alex Soft does what he does magnificently, and I still love his work. But the thing is that there is only one Alex Soft. You can't, if you try to emulate that by thinking that you're going to use a 5.4 camera or whatever, you're never going to get there, because the thing is that what he brings here is very, very different. That's the beauty of photography. You know, you can never emulate somebody. You can try, and if you're a good technical photographer, you'll get close, but you'll never be a Nadaf Kanda just by putting green and cyan tones in, or Alec if you're shooting on 5.4 or 10.8. What you're going to do is take the best of what he does and then add in your stuff, and to wash it out your system. That's just going to be a process of understanding. Look, I don't know, how young are you? How old are you?
18.
Yeah, 18, man. I've got 30 years on you, man. Like, you know what I mean? So I started at the altar of Sebastian Salgado and James Natchway. So if you don't even know these guys, go do your research, go check those guys out. They're black and white classic photos. That's where I started. I went through the whole canyon, right? And it took me a long time to wash all of that out of my system, because to actually realize what I do and why it's valuable. So you're still on a journey to go through the process. Go shoot the 5.4, see where it takes you. You know, my man over there at the back, Craig, right at the back over there with the spot, he and me started together. Like, you know, he was like established. And the thing was that, you know, he's been on the same journey, man. He's shooting beautiful black and white 10.8s now. He was shooting Leica 35mm back in the day. Like, it just takes time. You just got to just take it as it comes. And the difference, my other thing to you is like, you know, don't pay too much attention to Instagram. It's going to psychologically mess your head up. Go make the work. See, you can compare yourself to soft, but you never be soft. So don't try that. Don't try to be that. What's your name?
Sorry.
Be Johnny. Be Johnny. Just make the work. You know, it's just a process. There's no secret sauce or anything. Work. If you love photography enough, you'll get there. You know, and if you're studying, you're college. So if you've got good tutors, they'll tell you the same thing. They'll say it's a great picture, but Johnny, you need to step up and like just do the research. But process takes time, and you know, don't be afraid to fail. You know, I still fail. You know, I tell you, this is my Alex Soft story for you. Make you really laugh. So I also do this project called Passport, so kind of democratic portraits using a passport camera, and I try to get prominent people. Like, obviously, I went Alec, right? So I asked him, Alec, can I take a picture? He was in London. He said yes. So I go to the Barbican, set everything up. I take the picture, blah blah blah. He goes. I pull the Polaroids and they're black. I forgot to take the bloody dark slide out. That's me at 48, right? And so I call him and I say, sorry, can you please? And he did it again. That's the beauty of Alex Soft, but you can still fail. And still, but it's about learning, yeah? I hope that's helped a little bit. Anybody else?
You talk a lot about your what being very research led. How much of the like the people you meet, like how much is that like on the ground, and like how much is that like planned, or like, you know, how much content?
Yeah. So with with the Lost in the Wilderness series, I met a woman in Devon who was raising money, propane gas for heating on the reservation, and she put me in touch with a guy who was like an elder. And then the elder then introduced me bit by bit over the course of 5 years, and we had kind of conversations. And so that one came through this idea of meeting constantly. If I'm doing a story for a magazine, that is all completely pre-planned, like a week before, and you're kind of hitting everybody up. And you might have a production, somebody on the ground who's literally fixing for you. For long-term projects, it's about slow introductions. With Memoire, the actors or the fashion models, what happened was, from that fashion story that I did with Max, we met the agency prior a year, and then I contacted them again and said, I'm doing this project, can you help?
and it allowed that. So it changes. I mean, you know, for personal work, it just takes time. You've got to build trust and find the right people, and sometimes let go of the wrong people, and it allows you that kind of growth. And you've got to kind of make them understand the kind of work you want to do, but also be open to listening, especially like now, by listening what they are saying, what's important to them, that dialogue. Because like 30 years ago, I would parachute into a place and bang, 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 and just come out, and there would be no connection, no exchange. I was that kind of news guy in there. Today it's about talk to me, make me understand what don't I know, and then you build those relationships. And like I said, the fashion, you know, yeah, it's just you can. I always say to the research, you'll meet the right people and all the wrong people, but you've got to keep the dialogue open, yeah, and just be brave about asking. What can anybody say to you at most is no, right? That's the thing. They can say yes to you, got a whole door open. Anybody else? Yeah.
I think just on the same subject of research, I thought quite a person, I guess, a negative connotation. I look at research like you get your news right, you get your paper right, you start quite literally researching in a very methodical way. Describe to that. Do you have like
I have a whole plethora of research. So what I mean by that is that computer thing, I don't always follow that. I might read like the New Yorker. At the same time, I might read some fiction. I might read a poem. You know, somebody might give me a photo book, which I would maybe look at. But I kind of have a whole thing, the whole computer thing sitting there. Some people really work for academia. You know, my favorite subject at school is motor mechanics. I like to work by hand. So psychologically, I'm kind of drawing on all these different things that come together for research. Like with the Lakota thing, it was really organic. So we talk about that picture of the flag. That was like Bob Marley from the album from Legend that led me to a book on Manifest Destiny, which then took me to Crazy Horse, and then finding out how he was captured and caught, and so that's what led to it. But you know, and then seeing Denzel Washington, you know, they're like, holy cow, this whole film and this moment, and then luck. So I wouldn't always say sitting there. If it works for you, fantastic. But I'm not the guy. Bang bang bang. You know, it's not me. But lots of people, it works for lots of people. Some people work by a very prescribed method of research. I am very, very attuned to being quite eclectic about drawing things in and kind of making these connections afterwards sometimes that the research has taken me. But like I said, the boy, the sun dancer, the research didn't make the picture in the sense that I went there with the idea of making a landscape, but the picture I came away with was the sun dancer. Yeah? Okay, anybody else? No? There's probably food in the other place, though. Little drinks. We should all go, I say. Yeah?
Absolutely spot on.
Perfect.
So, first thing, well, I'll say the advertisement. Don't forget to pick up one of these and come back tomorrow and Sunday for all of these wonderful public talks that are on over the weekend, and of course some fabulous publishers with their books. And there will also be a book signing of the two books here, which Tom will lead, I suspect.
Yeah, sure.
We're going to do that outside, Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're just do that outside. If you want to see more of the photo photography and read more, then just follow us outside. And at the Martin Parr Foundation, there are drinks, and I'm sure there's nibbly things out there as well, and there's more things to see. So thank you for coming. We show your appreciation, and thank you.
I'm going to say, you can always email me if you've got any questions. Please don't worry. No DMs, though.
Can I just say, it's really nice to see like that understand like the bash might be different. Like, I'm first, like, in photography,